This story starts in the middle of a medical emergency, one of those that do not warn, since a boy of only 4 years old named Colton is transferred to perform surgery immediately for a perforated appendix. And there begins a controversy about whether the sky really exists or not. After what happened, Colton's parents are very distressed. Todd, who is a city firefighter, despite being a man of faith, is confused, very angry towards God and does not understand why these things happen to him, being a faithful preacher. Just as it happens to us, when we are in trouble, the first thing we blame is God.
¿Llamarías a algunos amigos para que oren por él?
The entire church where he preaches, the neighbors, and his co-workers, heed the call and begin to pray for Colton as he is in danger of losing his life. It was a very difficult time for this family, although surprisingly, the doctors gave him good news after the operation. After having been on the verge of death, Colton managed to survive. Already recovered, in a conversation with his father, he begins to have a different attitude towards life, going from being a shy and fearful child, to a child who tells his father that there is nothing to be afraid of. The boy tells him that while he was being operated on, a choir of angels sang to him in the hospital during the operation. He also saw his mother talking on the phone and his father yelling at God in desperation. His father is speechless, however with great curiosity he asks him how he saw all that. The boy explains that he saw them from above, when he was rising towards the sky. Todd in disbelief just smiles. Concerned, Sonia tells Todd that there are many bills to pay and among them are Colton's medical expenses, at which point the boy tells them not to stop paying the doctor, because he saw him when he helped him, leaving his parents frozen. His sister Cassie has also noticed something strange in Colton, and tells his father that one day he told him that Jesus has a horse. Todd apparently doesn't care, until he talks to Colton to tell him that even though he is a preacher, he knew that Jesus had a horse. The boy tells him that he does have one and it is colored like the rainbow, but that in the sky those colors are brighter, because he himself saw them there. Immediately, Todd tells Nancy what happened, but she deduces that it is part of his great imagination. Although Todd doubts so for the next few days, he keeps asking Colton questions. Colton tells him that it was in the church that the angels sang to him. He asked them to sing, "We Will Rock You," but the angels laughed. He also saw Jesus, who told him that in that place no one could hurt him, so he took him to meet someone, but he didn't say who. Todd hearing all this, he doesn't know what to believe, he is very dismayed. To clear up his doubts, he goes to a psychoanalyst who studies similar cases. As she is an atheist, she tells him that everything is part of the brain since it creates interpretations when leaving, but Todd leaves with more questions than answers. That same day, following the advice of one of his friends, Todd went to church, and in the middle of the preaching he told about the experience that Colton had in the hospital, but a controversy is created, since according to the doctors the boy did not die, nor did he revive, so no one understands how he was able to see the sky. His own father doubts and is not sure if he believes what he says. Colton's mother tells him that half of the church wants to stop feeling and start thinking, the other half wants the opposite. At that precise moment Todd is called from a press, since they are about to write an article about him. Sky and want to interview Colton. His parents very insecurely accept the proposal. When the interview is given, Colton answers the questions, saying that he saw Jesus and that he had marks on his hands and feet, but in the end he realizes that no one believes him, and he asks his dad.
¿Tú me crees, papá? ¿No es cierto?
But his father evades him with another answer, at which point his wife gets upset with him. The interview became in all the newspapers, but most people do not believe it. They make fun of Top and his family, even the children at Colton's school offend him. Cassie beats up 2 of them to defend her brother. At night Todd, curious to know more about the trip to heaven, strikes up a conversation with Colton. He wants to know if Jesus is how he appears in the photos, but Colton told him that the only thing he looks like is the clothes, but that he doesn't. It is the same, because Jesus had blue-green eyes. Of course he did not believe him since Sonia has blue and he has green, which is why he thinks he is confused, and relates it to theirs. The next morning, Colton is reappeared by Jesus, who takes him to meet a girl. At the same time that his parents talk that they are already running out of money, so Todd does not know how to get out of debt. The church leadership meets with Todd to discuss his commitment to the church. They are worried about whether or not he will preach, since the matter of Colton's trip to heaven has many people disturbed. Nancy proposes to give him some time, in order to prepare the future of his church and go looking for another preacher, if necessary. At that moment Todd feels like the world is crashing down on him. The next day he goes to the hospital to ask for another term to pay for Colton's operation, but they cannot give him more terms. At that moment, Colton goes after a sick boy. Despite his father trying to stop him, his son says he has to tell him something and convinces him to take him to a stretcher, where he holds the hand of a critically ill boy and tells him, "Don't worry, no one is going to hurt you." In view of Colton's strange attitude after that day, Todd decides to continue investigating even more. Now he does it online and searches everything about near-death experiences, which causes his wife annoyance, since she does not like the subject and prefers to focus on educating her children. Again, Todd is surprised when Colton asks him about his grandfather named Sabu. He talks about him and tells him that he saw him in heaven and told him that everything was going to be fine. Todd, puzzled, shows him several photos of him, but Colton says that it is not him, until he shows him one where he was young. There Colton he assures him that this was his grandfather, since in heaven everyone is young. Now yes, Todd begins to realize that something is really happening, and that perhaps God is sending them a message. Sonia arrives and tells him what happened. Full of anger and helplessness in the face of this situation, she says that she wants to believe Colton because he is an innocent child and incapable of lying, but at the same time what he says is impossible. That is why he feels frustrated and not knowing what to think or what to do with his life. On the contrary, Sonia thinks that what Colton says is part of her imagination, from so many stories she has heard throughout her life. She tells him that she loves him but that she cannot help him with that. The next day, when Todd visits his grandfather in the cemetery, he finds Nancy at his son's grave. She confesses that she is not angry with people, nor with him, nor with her son. She is only angry with God, because he gave her son back and took hers, and she apologizes. So Todd makes Nancy understand that God loves everyone equally, including his son and hers. At home, Sonia was perplexed to hear Colton asking about the baby he lost a few years ago, telling him that he had met her in heaven and that the girl kept hugging him. She was just like Cassie but with Sonia's hair. There Sonia, very moved, finally understands that it is true, crying hugs Todd, when suddenly the phone rings. Turns out the news guys want him to tell them the story of Colton's trip to heaven, and Todd happily invites them to church on Sunday to talk about it. There, Todd begins his preaching based on Colton's experience, about the existence or not of heaven, and begins by saying that he is there in front of everyone, with wounds to heal, with fears that still resonate and that perhaps many people are just like him, but what he can tell you is that the pain he suffered at some point was nothing compared to what he felt when he saw his son so close to death. And regarding the question of whether heaven exists, he answered that it does exist, that Colton was in the heaven that God showed him. He continued reflecting that if heaven is real, everyone would lead different lives, because everyone has already seen heaven. Or is it that we do not see it in the first cry of a baby, in the courage of a friend, in the hands of a patient or a doctor, in the love of a father or a mother, and yet, having seen him, we prefer hell, hatred and fear? Of course, for him, heaven does exist, since God is love. Todd confesses that he was preaching and saying 1,000 times, in heaven as on earth, doubting if one day he really heard what he was saying, and that his son saw heaven and then spoke with Jesus, that name Jesus, which generates so much hope in many and so much hate in others. And ends by saying that God had a plan for him, that it was not the one that had been traced. God destroyed his pride and changed his heart to love, and the only thing that love demands is that he let everyone know that they are not alone. All touched and happy by his reflection go to hug him. At that moment they all feel the presence of God and his immense love. After that day, Todd learns of other cases of children in other parts of the world who had visions of heaven. There was a girl in particular who painted Jesus, and when Colton saw the painting, he said that this was the Jesus that he saw in the sky. Then Sonia, full of joy, gives Todd the happy news that she is expecting another child. That's right, heaven is in each one of us, guided by the immense love that God has for us. This is the summary of a Christian movie called Heaven is for Real.